All right, good afternoon. So we are here today with a panel of kind of health communication experts. Presenting today to our COM 496, that's our senior seminar class here at Western Carolina University. And so the first thing I'm going to ask everybody to do is kind of introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about kind of what your job responsibilities are and what your current title is. So we'll start with Joseph.
Hey everybody, my name is Joseph Dix. I'm a senior communications consultant for Mission Health. And basically I support our 3 West Region hospitals. So that's Transylvania Regional in Brevard, Highlands Cashers Hospital up in Highlands, and also Angel Medical Center in Franklin. So basically what that means as far as my day-to-day role goes, generally, I manage internal communications and support the CEOs at those 3 hospitals. And that could be anything from drafting employee communications on behalf of the CEOs to, speech writing, talking points for them. Really, each week is a new adventure. So you never really know until you get in it. There is also an external component to what I do. I work closely with our PR and media relations manager in drafting news releases, health briefs. For our website, I may be drafting website content, or for our blog, maybe blog write-ups, or at least interfacing with our subject matter experts to have articles written. There's also, and this is relevant even more so today, there's an emergency management communication aspect to what I do. So basically, providing communication support for a variety of instances that may impact services at our hospitals. And that could be anything from power outages to global pandemics. Who knew? Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, that in a nutshell is what I do.
Fantastic. Adrian?
Well, hi, I'm Adrian Ammerman. I'm Communications and Improvement Specialist with W&C Health Network. We're an alliance of the hospitals here in our region of Western North Carolina. So in my role, I support my organization and our organizational communications, like as I said, a lot of the blog and newsletter, website stuff. But then I also do a lot of support. We convene a collaborative called Healthy Impact, which is where hospitals and health departments in the region work together on community health improvement. So for that, I support those folks, those health educators, and how they talk about their work, how they're doing public health in their county. And then I also convene a regional group called the W&C Health Communicators Collaborative. And that's, again, hospital and health department health communicators. And that group is really a peer support group. And right now we're working closely together around the pandemic, COVID-19. So I support that group and just bringing them together and help think about communication strategy. Yeah, I love it. Mm-hmm. It's a great place to be.
Awesome, thank you. Stacy, how about you?
Hello, I'm Stacy Wood. I work for Buncombe County Health and Human Services, and we are a consolidated health and human services agency. So that means that I am the communications manager for public health, social work, and economic services. And that entails many different aspects of our operations, and the needs are different every day. In a regular world, that would mean updating web content, evergreen content, that kind of stuff, handling all public information requests, media requests, and responding, working with program areas to design communication plans and strategies. And again, because we are a consolidated health and human services agency, that can range from foster care all the way to immunizations and public assistance, WIC, SNAP. So it's every day is different, and that's a non-COVID world. So in the COVID world, I am leading the COVID Communications Joint Information Center in Buncombe County's Emergency Operations Center in our COVID-19 response here.
Awesome. Thank you.
And doing a great job, an amazing job.
It's a little overwhelming to hear you say all of that stuff. I mean, for every single one of you, like the list of the things you're responsible for is, it sounds like you actually probably have even more than what you're able to list. You just haven't, checked your emails for the latest request that's kind of come through, right? Can you all talk a little bit about kind of how you got to this point? I mean, where were you at as an undergrad and graduating college, and kind of what got you to this point today? And anybody can start, so.
I can start.
Awesome.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I when I was an undergrad, I thought I wanted to do social work because I really cared about social justice and making change and helping people. And my first job out of college, I worked at the Brooklyn Criminal Court as a victim services advocate. And that's when I realized that direct service was not something I was personally cut out for. And so I started looking for what could I do that I felt like still could potentially make a difference and use my skills, but was maybe more on a macro level. And that led me into nonprofit communications and marketing, because I realized I could use my skills in writing, storytelling, to help people be aware of the issues that are so important out there, that whether it's, importance of safety in public housing or having food access, just helping people and organizations and causes tell the stories to get people involved and engaged. So I've really been doing that my entire career over the past 15 years now, and got specifically interested in health communications when I worked at the National Women's Law Center in DC on women's health and reproductive rights issues, and just realized that I feel really, really strongly about health as in particular. So that led me into health communications.
So that's kind of interesting, working at that particular center in DC. Was it kind of a social justice kind of advocacy organization? Yeah,
they do a lot of policy level advocacy. Yeah, that's when I decided to go get my master's in communications with a focus in health communication. Ooh. And I'm glad I did.
Now, where did you go?
I went to Johns Hopkins.
Okay. Like, yeah. I was just telling you all earlier, yes, I have a student interested in going to Johns Hopkins. So she's in this class. She will be glad to hear that, right?
I haven't always been sure that it was a good use of my money to go to grad school, but in more recent years, I've decided, yes, I'm glad I did.
Okay. Joseph, how about you?
So I graduated from UNC Greensboro with a communication studies degree and a concentration in PR. And actually, right out of college, I got my start in nonprofit communications. I worked for Goodwill Industries of Central North Carolina. I guess I was there about 3.5 years as a community relations manager. So that was a lot of fun. From there, I actually transitioned into higher ed and actually went back and worked at UNC Greensboro for about 11.5 years for a couple of different departments. Started out with business and auxiliary services, so did marketing and communications for services like the bookstore, dining, the student ID center, things like that. And then after a few years, there was another position that opened up on campus with campus activities and programs, which I had always really wanted to jump into that role, and had an absolute blast working in that department. Basically, in the 4+ years that I was working for campus activities and programs, I oversaw marketing communications for all the student organizations. I did PR and marketing for our university concert and lecture series, and all kinds of things beyond that. So that was a really, really awesome time in my career, and a lot of fun too. And so how I ended up in healthcare communications was kind of just out of the blue. It was actually one of my coworkers at UNC Greensboro that had a close friend and colleague who worked for Cone Health, which is the health system based in Greensboro. And they had just posted jobs for marketing managers for each of their hospitals within the Cone Health system. So on a whim, I was like, well, let's just see what happens, you know. So I applied, and you know, through those connections, I was able to get an interview, and I guess the rest is history. They say that. I spent about 3.5 years working for Cone Health. I was the marketing manager for their flagship hospital, Moses Cone Hospital, there in Greensboro. And then life brought me to Asheville. I'm coming up on 5 years here in Asheville, and have been working with Mission Health ever since. So it's been great.
Fantastic, fantastic. Stacey, how about you? Tell us a little bit about kind of your journey.
Well, I'll just have to say I'm not great at talking about myself, so this is a little difficult for me. But I graduated from UNC Asheville in 2005, and at that time I had an internship in the housing building safety department, and I was a political science major, and did my senior thesis on the minimum housing code for the city of Asheville, and that housing code has since been completely eliminated because it was, I think they found it to be unconstitutional, actually. So anyway, I served in a variety of roles at the city of Asheville, all the way from building safety to where I had to turn people's water off because they didn't have a minimum housing certificate, and I worked in the IT department where I managed the help desk, and then I moved into the parks department, where I helped to run the Belshare Festival and the big festivals that were city produced. And I guess in 2013, I ended up taking a job with Buncombe County. At the time, it was more of a prevention focused job that included prevention social work, libraries, parks, and that shifted. So I ended up working for Health and Human Services as a communication information specialist. And I've been doing that since 2013. And my roles and responsibilities have shifted quite a bit. And I never saw myself where I am today, but it's been a great journey and a great tour of local government.
And that's awesome. I think what's kind of interesting about the stories that all of you have told here is how you started in one place and you kind of had this winding path to kind of end up, you know, where you're at today. So I think one of the things that students tend to get a little nervous about is locking into that one thing, right? So in terms of kind of following this winding path, can you think about some things that might have helped you kind of navigate this world, or maybe some things students should kind of keep in mind as they're working through kind of building their career as some of these changes might come along to them? Maybe even an anecdote from your own life that said, okay, this window opened, so that's when I decided to jump through it, that kind of a thing.
For me, maybe just reassuring yourself that, yeah, sometimes you will make a misstep along the way, but that's okay. You know, go in it for the long haul. I can think of one situation I found myself in. So in between the time that I worked for Goodwill Industries and before I started working for UNC Greensboro, I followed what I thought was going to be a good opportunity. There was a local nonprofit based in Greensboro, and I won't give any names, but they did work similar to what Habitat for Humanity does. But it was probably the most abysmal 6 months of my life. I knew the day that I showed up on my first day, when I had to wait for somebody to open up the door for about a half hour, that I had made a mistake. There were lots of writings on the wall, so to speak, that told me that I had really made a bad jump. But you know, things worked out. You know, I found an incredible opportunity at UNC Greensboro, and that led me, you know, eventually to a career in healthcare, so through connections. So don't be worried about the missteps. It'll happen, but you'll redirect your course.
Yeah, and I would say that pursuing your deep interest is an important part. I did my senior thesis on the minimum housing code. I wasn't particularly passionate about it, but I knew that I thought it was interesting, and I thought it was a a really great example of how your local government directly affects you and why that is so important, and how those policies impact all of us so closely. So I just think continuing to grow your interest and to follow those interests and to care deeply about the work that you do. It's not, I didn't like turning off water, you know, or answering help desk all the time, but there were certainly aspects of that work that were truly interesting and engaging. And even when I started with Buncombe County, I went home that first night, that first week, I would go and watch my son play on the playground and just cry because I thought, I don't want to be a social worker. This is terrifying. I don't want to do this. And, but here I am. I'm proud to support these social workers who are doing awesome work in our community. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So I've learned a lot throughout all of this, but I've always just kind of kept pursuing those interests and learning constantly.
I think something I agree with those things that you said, as Joseph and Stacy. I would add to, people want you to succeed, I think. The people who don't want you to succeed, though, don't let them throw you off course, because you might come across those people every now and then. But overall, I'd say people do want you to succeed. And so I would just encourage everyone, particularly if you're starting out in your career, to, even if you find yourself in a job where it's not exactly what you would want to be doing, or not as much money as you think you should be making, really give it your all, because you never know when those relationships that you're creating can turn into great friendships or professional networks down the road. Particularly in our region, I think, you know, I'm really privileged to be working today with people that I first met years and, you know, when I first moved to Asheville in 2012. And so those, being able to stand up tall and know that I do my best work, whether or not it's a job that I see myself in forever, that's really important.
Yeah, it's interesting. So if you can kind of think a little bit about, kind of now that you know what you know, what kinds of things do you think students, maybe even some folks that are kind of maybe midway through their program here at the university, what are some things they could start to do now to think about how they want to position themselves, or how they want to, you know, by the time they're getting to the end, like some of these other students are, you know, what are some things they think you would advise them to do now?
Internship.
Okay.
It's a great idea. I learned so just as valuable as learning what you do want to do.
Yeah, definitely internships. You know, if you have an opportunity to shadow someone on the job, that's always a great opportunity. And beyond that, you know, networking, making connections in the community, that really has shown to really be a great tool for me, just as I've, you know, navigated my career path. So personal connections.
And I would suggest developing those technical skills as well, whether it's graphic design or video production, social media, and starting to actively monitor your progress in those areas as well. Just so if you do get an opportunity, you're able to quickly show your success in these areas.
Do y'all think, or could you comment a little bit, certainly COVID is affecting our world big time right now, but in terms of kind of healthcare and communication, are there any particular issues and trends, and certainly COVID related as well as other kinds of things, that you kind of see affecting kind of the work that you do and kind of the call for the work going forward?
I think for us, and we were doing a lot digitally before the pandemic hit, but even more so now, so much of what we do is shifting to a digital environment, be it, you know, our website, social media, with things like FaceTime, or not FaceTime, but Facebook Live, online videos, things like that, education. we've seen a huge move towards digital communications, even to things like our, so we have a consumer magazine, My Healthy Life. We've shifted to a digital format for that in recent months. So definitely a digital shift.
I think it's really important to learn and think and talk to people about what collaborative communications looks like. I think we're ideally going away from, particularly when we're looking at health communications, we don't want communications that are top down, created by people who don't reflect the audience that they're trying to reach. So encourage your students to research what high quality health communications looks like, and how that is involves participatory research and focus groups, and sort of look into collective impact as an approach for how we can do collaborative work together. It takes time. It's harder in a lot of ways, but it's so worth it. And being able to demonstrate that you've had that kind of thinking and how you approach communications, I think will illustrate a level of just openness and sophistication that we should have in our field. Sophistication.
Well, and just
sophisticated.
to piggyback on Adrian's comment, I do think it's important to pay attention to your trusted community messengers and to start to understand more about what culturally competent communications look like, and just pay attention to those leaders in your community and how their words and actions influence others.
It's interesting that you talked about, Adrian, participatory research and this idea of, STACY, cultural kind of competency and listening to those leaders. And I know, Adrian, we've kind of had this discussion, so this kind of sets this up a little bit. And you all kinds of mentioned social media. Can you talk a little bit about the impact or what you see is needed today from all this kind of digital platforms that we now have out there, all these social media platforms? Kind of what are your challenges kind of going forward or looking to use them? Adrian, I'm going to pick on you because I know that we've talked about this a little bit. So,
well, a big challenge I see is that a lot of we know a lot of the public is online, and then we need to look at, well, who is online, who's getting health information out there. And if you look at the state of our media, particularly in smaller media markets where we don't have we have a lot of communities where they don't have a local newspaper, for example. So where are they getting their information? They're going online, and oftentimes public health and more rural communities, for example, they don't have the resources to meet people online with the evidence-based health information that they need. So in our work in our region, I think we're just exploring opportunities to put those digital tools in the hands of public health communicators, and how to do that in a way that's sustainable, replicable. I'm really interested in that. So I think there's interesting things happening in the field of health communications. How do we take all of that learning and how do we get it on the ground where people are actually doing the work? So I think that could be such an interesting direction to go into for those of you who are watching this who are interested in communications and in health communications. Like, how do we translate a lot of this innovation and come up with new ideas and new approaches?
Awesome. Joseph, I know that you had mentioned some of the work that you do is with some actually more rural parts of Western North Carolina, out there with, you say, Angel, I'm not going to remember the name, and Transylvania County, some things like that. So what are some of those challenges you have with reaching maybe your audiences out there?
So we do have certain portions of the population that either don't have access to, internet or computing in their homes. So we always approach any communication or messaging we're sending out in a communication mix. So although it may have a digital component to it, we always mirror that with information that we may push out through, for example, columns that our CEOs publish monthly in the regional newspapers, or in non-COVID times, maybe face-to-face, public forums, we call them town hall meetings, where we invite, the public into the facilities. So just finding a good mix of communication methods to fill in the spaces where maybe the digital methods don't reach.
Stacy, I think public health is kind of an interesting area to talk about that issue too, of having access. Certainly when we think about public health, we want to have, we want to get this information to everybody that, our governments serve. And so what are some of the challenges you find with doing some of that work?
Sure. Well, Joseph brought up a very good point. A lot of people in our rural areas do not have internet, and people sometimes don't have smartphones. So again, just really having an appreciation for the different formats that people receive information, even down to your website. Is it formatted for smartphones? I mean, it's just, the list is never ending. But we've also, in COVID times, have learned the value of making sure that all of our information is accessible to our deaf and hard of hearing audiences, as well as our Spanish speaking communities. And we have seen huge viewership in all of our Spanish language videos, community updates, materials that we have developed. So just never underestimate and always plan for those different types of formats when you're rolling out seriously important health and safety information.
So now we're going to get to, lots of folks watching this are staring at graduation in, I think, a little less than two to 3 months here. What kind of advice would you give to those folks that are starting to think about, okay, how do I make that transition from being student to being working professional? What do I need to do to try and launch a career in this field?
One thing that I believe it was Stacy mentioned earlier that helped me out a lot, and working in nonprofit and higher ed helped me with this, but being able to diversify and cross-train, especially in the early phases of your career. Working in specifically nonprofit and higher ed, I was able to get my hands dirty in a lot of different areas, and learn about graphic design, learn about photography, learn about all the things that you may not get if you just dove right into any particular career. But yeah, definitely finding time and finding ways to educate and cross-train, that's helped me out.
And I'd say too, if you find yourself having to take as your first job something that isn't exactly in what you want, look for ways within that job to still develop your skill set that you want to do. So you could volunteer to do, design and create a staff newsletter. You could ask if you could help out with even if you're working, I don't know, I don't want to give an example, but help out with the company's social media page. Just
right.
Then on your resume, I think that would show a lot of go get 'emness.
Yeah, I got
Gumption.
Gumption, yes, that's a
To
great
say,
word.
okay, this wasn't. I actually was just looking at a resume for an intern applicant, and I noticed on one of her job descriptions, it wasn't a job in communications, but she had helped out with communication-related activities. That's what my eyes went to, and that's what I care about at the end of the day. Do you have experience in what I'm interested in maybe hiring you to do?
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Well, yeah, I have a job opening right now that I'm hiring for, and we had 47 applicants. and applicants all the way from attorneys to some people, you know, that you might recognize. And so I haven't even gotten a chance to dive in to look at the applications yet, but and this is just for COVID stuff. So non-COVID, it would really be appealing to me to speak with a candidate who could demonstrate, even if it was a volunteer, you know, volunteer work on those technical like skills and demonstrated ability to move projects and work, you know, in the technical side or the communications, you know, face-to-face side, to move projects forward with demonstrated outcomes, regardless of whether you succeed or not. You know, it's just all about, like what Adrian said, just the attempt and the efforts at trying your best. So, you know, you're not always going to be successful, that's for sure, and embrace that and prepare yourself for it. But at least at the end of the day, you can say, well, I tried this, it didn't work, so I took a step back and I tried this other thing, and just demonstrating grit and the ability to take feedback and to keep moving forward.
I'll also add
I'm sorry,
really quick.
Sure.
Now is a good time to think about who are you going to ask to be your references. And if you haven't talked to them in a long time, now is a great time to reach out to them. Just check in with a friendly kind of just thinking about you and how you're doing. Here's an update on my life. So that when you do ask them to be a reference, they're not like, I haven't heard from this person in 3 years. Who is this?
Thank you, Adrian. That 100% agree with you.
I am with you too. I have had former students that I haven't heard from in a couple of years are saying, you know, can you be a reference? I'm like, maybe we should have a conversation first, you know, so I actually know what you're up to. Sure, I get it. Are there, and kind of along those lines, are there, one of the things we have them do is kind of prepare these kind of personal website portfolios. Are there any kinds of things that you might give some advice on what they should think about putting in those to demonstrate what they can do?
Maybe like a short video.
Mm-hmm.
Something, don't be afraid to have a sense of humor and be a little off the wall. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing someone, even something that they did on their personal social media that was creative or artistic or demonstrated that just their unique perspective and how they engage people.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Don't be afraid to, you know, be your true self. And going back to what I said earlier, I think, you know, as you're looking at items to put into your portfolio, just, you know, look at as much variety as you can include, show as much diversity.
So,
But also be mindful of your audience.
yeah, that is something we actually talk quite a bit about in communication. We're hoping that they listen. So, kind of one last question here. Just some folks are thinking about graduate school. I've kind of mentioned that. What are y'all's thoughts on graduate school for folks that are looking to go into the world of health communication?
I'm thinking about graduate school, but
Okay.
So you know, I've always considered graduate school, but you know, I kind of graduated with my undergrad and it was off to the races. And for me, it's worked out. You know, I haven't found that not having a graduate degree has held me back in any way. And I've always had, you know, a personal kind of struggle with, you know, what would that graduate degree be in? You know, I had looked at, you know, public affairs programs and things along those lines. But really for me, it's been okay. You know, I have made the decision not to pursue a graduate degree, at least, you know, up until this point. So.
My recommendation would be definitely to take a pause and try to get some real life work experience in the area that you're thinking of getting your master's degree in first, because it can just be a lot of time and money, and wouldn't want to do that and then decide that you don't want to do it. I got my master's degree 8 years ago and I'm still paying for it. So it's a big decision, but I definitely you know, I am glad that I did it, especially if you enjoy going to school and enjoy learning. But, you know, I think Stacy and Joseph are a testament to the fact that this is a field where I don't think you have to have it to be incredibly successful and very good in your job. It's really about more so about your hands-on on the ground experience that you've had.
And for me too, I've found ways, you know, in lieu of a graduate degree, I've through the years, you know, found myself taking additional classes in graphic design and photography just to learn more about different aspects. And that's been a lot of fun, and it's helped me grow a lot, you know, in the communications field, in understanding, you know, for example, if I'm working on, you know, a project with a brochure or a video that we're putting together, just understanding different components of what goes together to make that work. It's been helpful.
Awesome. Stacy, you mentioned you're kind of considering it. What are you rolling over in your mind?
I'm thinking about a master's in health communications.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, many years ago, a former boss of mine said, "Well, you don't need to go to school. There's no benefit to going to school and staying with Buncombe County. You're never going to go anywhere else with a master's degree." And I regret listening to her. So I always regretted that. But anyway, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
About it for like 3 years now.
Yeah. Well, it's a big decision. It's, you know, it's interesting. One of the things that I've two things I typically tell students is, one is I've been to a conference and we had professionals from the agency world, the corporate world, and the health world. And somebody said, "Do you need to go to graduate school?" And the agency guy said, "Nah, you're going to be fine. You can do it." And the corporate person said, "Well, maybe you might want to think about it." And then the health person said, "Yep, you got to go to graduate school." And so there was the definite maybe. I think that we kind of all hear on those kinds of things. And then the other thing I always tell students is, you don't go to graduate school to make more money. You go to graduate school to learn more about the thing that you're really interested in. So it sounds like you all are right there too, as well.
I will say, I think it's important. I feel like when I was deciding on my master's program, I could have done more research about what kind of degree I got. And I now understand that, for example, in the health communications field, you can get a master's in public health, where you can kind of concentrate in health communications depending on the program. I think Johns Hopkins actually has a master's in science, that where it's just in health communications. I got a master's of an MA in communications with a focus in health communications. I didn't really realize that there were different approaches, and if I were to do it again, I probably would have maybe done something like the MPH program, but focusing in health communication. So my point is just to say, to really think about what is it that you're going to want to do with it, and try to think ahead. This is so hard to do, but not just 5 or 10 years, but, you know, if I wanted to go into a leadership role in public health, I would probably need an MPH. And those people might care that I have an MA and not an MPH, even though I don't know. Just putting it out there that it's something to think about and really talk to different people about.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to know, right? I mean, I have an MA in advertising and public relations, and I'm not sure that it got me any more money or a particular job, but I certainly felt a lot better about my skills and what I could do when I did go for the jobs that I did go for. So it does kind of depend. But I've said the same thing, you know, if it's health and that's, you want to be hardcore health, sometimes the master's in public health might be the way to go. So again, a definite maybe, right? On all of these kinds of things that nobody likes to hear. So that's kind of all that I have for us today. Is there any other kind of great piece of wisdom that or something I haven't asked about that you think that we need to know? As we're trying to unlock all the secrets of building a career.
I think more than anything, just be open to the possibilities and, you know, growth opportunities that may come your way. And don't necessarily close any doors, you know, get out there and explore.
Awesome.
And then you probably have already talked about this with your students, but it's, you know, important to find a mentor, someone who you admire, and to learn from them and to shadow them as often as you can.
That's great, all great advice. And I would add to just remember it's also important to be a well-rounded individual. So don't forget to, take care of your mental and physical health and have hobbies and interests outside of school and work, because I feel like that makes us nicer people to work with and will in the long term really help your career.
Awesome. Fantastic. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Best